Have you ever delivered a project to a client that you worked really hard on, put your everything into, only to hear back from them that they had something completely different in mind? Well, today we are going to be talking about the fine art that is managing clients' expectations. And it truly is an art. I have had amazing clients. I have clients that have taken more effort from me, but all the experiences accumulated together have formed some processes that I've put into place that have helped my ability to manage clients well. So I have 7 points for you to share on how we can manage our clients better. Now, the first point is having clear communication from the start. It really starts with the onboarding process. From the very moment somebody onboards, you have about 48 hours, even better, 24 hours to give them another reason why they made a good decision. Buyer's remorse sets in very quickly when it comes to people that have just purchased from you. So if you can provide quick wins, which does come in the form of a smooth onboarding process and having clear communication, setting the entire project or retainer up for success, you're going to be better off. So they purchase from you, they sign a contract. Next, there should be some sort of project brief or template, could be a form, questionnaire of sorts, where you're going to get information from them that is going to help inform how the project is going to go. Their expectations, they're probably going to provide you with information that you need to perform your job well. And overall, this is probably going to cover things like the project goals, the deliverables, the timeline, and then also communication preferences to ensure that both parties are aligned. Now, the strategy that I've begun to employ is somebody gets onboarded, they purchase. The next thing is an onboarding call. So before we hop into strategy, before we hop into start grinding on some deliverables, we have an entire call dedicated to setting expectations, what the client is to expect in terms of communication, when they're going to hear from me, and how I want to hear from them, when I want to receive their feedback, and in what capacity. Some things they're not going to be able to provide feedback on. They're going to have to let go and let us be the experts in that portion of the project. In other parts, we want their feedback. We want to be able to refine. And of course, there's going to be general feedback about processes, how their experience has been. But when it comes to actual deliverables, that may vary. But regardless, there needs to be a conversation about here's what you're going to get, here's when you should expect these things, and then here is how we're going to talk. Is it emails? Are we going to do regular scheduled calls, or we asynchronously communicating only, talking Loom videos? But managing those expectations right out of the gate is super important. And there's a quote that I've heard in many different forms, and I'll share the two that have resonated with me the most. I once had a professor that said in college that all anger stems from blocked goals. And then later in life, I've also heard that all frustration comes from mismanaged expectations. So when it comes to your clients, if they're frustrated, it's likely because a expectation wasn't communicated clearly, or they had expectations that you fell short of, or obviously could be you weren't aware of. So mismanaged expectations can lead to frustration. The second thing is setting realistic expectations with your client. And this goes back to the initial meetings that you start having during a project is the timelines. We're setting benchmarks, we're explaining what potential challenges might arise. And of course, in my line of work, I'll be very straightforward. A lot of times clients will kind of think you're a miracle worker. They'll be like, you're in podcasting, you have a top 1% podcast, you can put me in touch with Joe Rogan. That's a pretty, that's not a realistic expectation. I don't know Joe like that. Me and Joe aren't broing out. Me and Joe aren't broing out. Bro Rogan out. No, there's something in there. I feel like you feel that. So sometimes clients can come on and have the expectation that you're going to alter their lives well beyond they could ever imagine, when in reality, your service may 2x their output when they're expecting 10x, and the realistic expectation is 2x because there's given challenges in your industry, or the project itself is bound to hit certain obstacles. So having those realistic expectations of, like, if you're running ads for folks, we're gonna hit a wall, or we're gonna have to test until we find the right thing, or there's gonna be X amount of time period that you're likely going to have to wait until we get results about a certain thing. If you have an expectation that you are going to 4x your salary or 4x your weekly income by next week without really setting up anything new, you're bound to set yourself up for that's an unrealistic goal. So the likelihood that you're going to achieve it is low. I feel like you get the point on this, but clients do come in, especially if you come in with, especially if part of your sales process is getting people really excited about your product, which they should be, or your service, and they onboard and they're amped and they're fired up and they think you're amazing and that you have the most authority in the space. That can set people up to think that you're going to be the one thing that changes their entire business and set them on a trajectory for everlasting success. So managing realistic expectations is important too. The next thing is, and this varies client to client, I have found, is when you check in with them. Regular updates and check-ins are important. I wouldn't equate not hearing from your client meaning that your client is happy. Sometimes I've heard from people who run agencies, like people following up like, hey, how's this client for you? And they're like, oh, I haven't heard from him, so it must be good. That's not always the case. So having regular check-ins, and usually it could be weekly, bi-weekly, whatever makes sense for the project and the scale of the project and also the cost of the project, deems those types of check-ins. So if a client is large and you really value their business and they kind of need more attention, it's worthwhile to be checking in once or twice a week, maybe 3 times. If it's a not as high value customer and they're on a lower ticket plan and it doesn't really require that much for fulfillment, maybe checking in every now and then could be the move. But in general, you're going to need to schedule something that's recurring, even if it's a 10 to 15 minute thing, and formatting these meetings or these emails to get the necessary information that you need is super important, especially if you're going to report progress to them. Reporting progress to your clients is extremely important because they always want to know that you have their best interest in mind and that you're actually tracking what's being accomplished, rather than some clients are hands-off enough to say, hey, I'm just going to assume that you're doing this, and if you can provide a report at the end of the week that shows that you are, even better. Maybe that's all they need. But in general, you need some sort of regular update and check-in. The next thing is educating your clients. This is particularly important if they are coming into your industry. If they are hiring you, it's likely that you have expertise that they do not, and they need your help in this space. So they might come in with a set of assumptions about what's going to be done because they've heard things online or they've heard from their friends and you were recommended by someone who talked about your space in this way, like you're the AI guy, so all of your automations are AI, when that might not be true, or you're the lead gen guy, so you found a way to automate all these things and none of it's personalized, when that might not be true. So educating your clients on your process too will help reduce the risk of what they expect your process to be like. Once again, this can happen in the onboarding document, having FAQs, or even having a flow chart of like, this is our process, and once you're at this point, we do this and you do this. This is what you're responsible for. This is what we're responsible for. But also providing details. Like a lot of clients that come to me, I'm informing them about the health of the podcast industry and statistics around podcasting and managing expectations in regards to downloads and what type of views they should expect and whether they should anticipate being approached by sponsorships or what their monetization strategy should be, because podcasting is unfamiliar. The details are unfamiliar to them, even if they have a grandiose idea of podcasting is good. So educating your clients in that way, one, positions you as the authority and gives you more leeway to do your expertise, how it's meant to be done, rather than clients trying to dictate based off of assumptions, and also, once again, set those clear expectations. The fifth thing is feedback loops. This is incredibly important. Same with the regular check-ins. You want to have a feedback loop where you're constantly able to make adjustments, albeit quickly or not quickly, depending on what your industry or product or service is and whether it's necessary or not. You need feedback to make a better quality product overall for your processes, but also a feedback loop to ensure your client is happy with what they're receiving. And typically this bleeds into number 6, which is dealing with scope creep. If you have a solid feedback loop, you can likely make adjustments and catch problems earlier than if you were to make assumptions of what the client said they wanted and finding out later what they actually wanted after you built something. Basically, it helps you get ahead of the curve and begin to make templates or repeatable things of sorts for this particular client, because you know they'll end up liking it, and then it's streamlined after a certain amount of time. That's typically what I've seen to be true with all the clients that I've worked with. There's a period where it's back and forth, it's back and forth, it's back and forth. We figure it out, streamline from there. Both parties have an understanding of what the type of product is going, or what the product is going to look like. So number 6 is dealing with scope creep. I dealt a lot with this during my software time. And if you're in the technical part of this world, you're usually going to refer back to the original project scope that's documented in your contract, or even the technical scope. But I also think that holds true to any sort of contract. So this also can be grounds to find a way to increase the value of a customer in terms of they can purchase more from you if they truly want this scope that it's creeping up, and you're willing to charge more and do it. Then that makes sense, because you can say, hey, this is what we agreed to in our contract. But if you want this added on, more than happy to do that for X amount of dollars, and now it'll be a smooth process from here on out. But if you're not willing to do that, and it will hinder your ability to deliver on time or deliver something of quality, you can say, hey, this is what we agreed to. If you want to consider this after we're done, we can talk about it. Or you could just straight up say, this wasn't what we agreed to, and that's not what I'm going to do. And typically, if there's a contract and clear communication, the contract will be respected. And if your client isn't willing to respect the contract that you put out, you got a whole nother list of problems. And number 7 is building a relationship based on trust. I've found that this takes time. As with anything, they might trust you enough to purchase from you, but they're not trusting you enough to let go and let you do your job, which happens over time. You have to prove yourself. The idea that once they've purchased, you no longer have to prove that you were the right choice is a fallacy. You're constantly having to prove why they should stay with you. As someone who purchases other services from other businesses, I'm constantly evaluating whether those services are serving my business and giving me the ROI that I am seeking. So other businesses are thinking that of you, especially if you are purchasing from others. They feel similarly. We've all purchased from other people, and we want to know that people are taking care of us. And that happens through showing up repeatedly. You can discuss with your client about the challenges that you faced in executing a given project, but it might be wise to save that to the end in the report of, this is what we overcame to ensure that you had the quality experience that, we try to set the standard for. But also documenting wins. Anytime you have a win for the client, that's always important too. Other things that I've seen be fruitful that I just want to include outside of the 7 are twofold. When a client is angry or upset about a mistake about something, I've found, and this isn't a card that you can play every time, and it should be authentic, you being angrier about that thing, that a mistake was made, does provide a sense of trust to your client. Like, oh, you are also incredibly angry that this thing got dropped? Oh, great. Like, you're going to ensure that this gets turned around. Wonderful. Clients really appreciate that. And that's not something you can do repeatedly, because if you're constantly making mistakes, then it's a habit. But every so often, if there is a big mistake and your client is furious, if you are also just as mad or even more upset about it, I feel like that goes a long way, because it shows that you are empathizing with them. Additionally, I think anytime you're facing a conflict with a client, I think creative problem solving and trying to find a solution that wins for everybody is always a good route to take. When it comes to emotional needs, it varies client to client. Some clients like to feel really in control, and some clients like to feel really reassured. So that may look like letting a client make the call on which font you use, and then it might also look like hopping on a 30-minute call to tell the client everything's running smoothly, it's okay. If that part varies, and that takes some emotional EQ. I also want to state that I am still new to the game. I have so much more to learn in regards to how to provide a quality experience for clients. These are just a few notes that I've found that have helped me. Other quick notes are resolving issues quickly always is a good thing. Clients like that. Being responsive. Clients like that. And of course, beyond just having empathy for their product or their service or their business, actually caring about them as well is useful too. Because, and this is how I operate in terms of business, you're encountering people. And I do think where I fall short in my business entrepreneurial pursuits is separating business relationships and personal relationships, because if those lines start to blur, it can alter your boundaries. So creating something in your onboarding, having the communication, creating boundaries and sticking to them, clear communication throughout, is a good recipe for client success overall. Hopefully these 7 quick points have been helpful and useful to you, at least to get the wheels turning once more on what it means to provide a great client experience. This is the Nickolas Natali Show. Please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, comment what you think about my green shorts. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.